Guten Tag, in this video I'll show you a slightly weird but super amazing technique that will greatly improve your bread scoring game. Scoring is a small incision that you make into your dough before baking. Nailing this technique is the key difference between poor and great oven spring. You will be able to achieve that perfect ear on your bread. And this ear is going to improve the texture of your final bread. The dough that I'm scoring here might look ordinary, but something is completely different. Let me elaborate. First, just so that we're on the same page, I made two doughs, one whole wheat and one with white flour. The recipe for the dough is very simple. It will make you two amazing breads. I'm using around 1000 grams of flour. Next I'm adding the water. I'm using around 600 to 800 grams of water. Generally, please go lower in the water amount. It will simplify everything. Afterwards, I'm adding around 20 grams of salt, equaling 2% in terms of baker's math. And lastly, I'm adding my sourdough starter. This is not an ordinary starter. This is a game changer starter for you. It's a stiff starter, which means it's using way less water than a regular starter. And this way, you will be able to ferment your bread dough for a much longer period of time, creating superb flavor. Seriously, I have a full video dedicated to this topic. If you're not using a stiff starter, you're definitely missing out. I'm sorry, I'm feeling so extra lazy today and that's why I'm using my stand mixer, but you definitely don't have to. You can knead everything together by hand. There is no need to invest in expensive tools. I have a full video showing you exactly how to knead a dough. Knead smarter, not harder. Now I'm probably a big weirdo, but I can't stop watching my dough knead in slow motion. I'm sorry. Anyways, after kneading, this is what you want to look out for. You want to make sure that you can achieve this window pane effect. This means that you have properly developed your gluten network. And this is the basis to create a fluffy bread in the end. The microbes will create CO2 and this is being trapped inside of your gluten matrix. Once the dough is properly kneaded, I like to extract a small piece of the dough. This will help you to better understand when your dough's fermentation is complete. I take this tiny piece and place it in a jar. I aim for around a 50% size increase. The size increase depends on your flour. Never rely on timings. By using this sample, you will always ferment your bread dough exactly on point. Just a slight change in room temperature and your timings are going to be off. This small sample is going to eliminate all the hassle for you. Now, if you want to understand more about bread making and care about all the tiny but important details, I recommend you to download my free book called The Sourdough Framework. Now, if you like, you can support the project with a small donation. This will allow me to continuously update and improve the book even further. Thanks for your support. The last step is for you to make the dough ball very smooth. You do this by dragging the dough over the surface. By having a smooth surface, the dough is going to stick less to your hands. This is one of the biggest mistakes I see beginner bakers doing. A non-smooth dough will only cause hassle later on. I keep the dough and the dough sample close together. The moment I see that the dough has flattened out quite a lot, I proceed and give the dough a stretch and fold. Once your sample has reached a 50% size increase, you can proceed and shape your dough. In this case, since I'm making two breads, I have to divide, pre-shape and then shape the dough. Afterwards, I proceeded and moved the dough into the fridge overnight so that I can bake it the next day. And now this is where it gets a little bit weird, but also super interesting. My theory is, if I dry out the dough surface a little bit, it's going to be way easier for me to do the actual scoring incision. Now, how do we dry out the dough surface? How do we test this? Let me show you. Now what I want to do is I want to bake the doughs for around 30 seconds without scoring, allowing the surface of the doughs to dry out, hoping that this is going to simplify my scoring. Crazy, right? But if this were to work, it would definitely simplify not just bread making, but also baguette making, where scoring is even more important. I'm carefully releasing both of my doughs from the bannetons. If you don't have a banneton, don't worry, you can also be using a container with a kitchen towel inside. I use parchment paper. It allows me to move the doughs a little bit after I have loaded them, but it's also optional. So let's now take these doughs and place them in the oven for around 30 seconds. I'm not sure if 30 seconds is the perfect value. Please experiment with this and share it with the community in the comments section. One downside to this method is definitely that you have to deal with a hot stone. And you need to have good gloves for this. You don't want to get burnt. Now, just by touching the dough, I can already feel that the surface is much drier. I'm using a lamb, but you can also just plainly use a razor blade. And make sure that when you perform the incision that you do it at a 45-degree angle. This 45-degree angle changes relative to where you are placing your scoring incision. This is an important learning. I always like to give each of my breads a small decorative scoring pattern. This is not the functional scoring. This just improves the look of the final bread. The functional scoring is essential though. And next up, I'm gonna be doing a very stupid mistake, which you should never do, as I figured out later. I decided for some reason to correct the scoring a little bit, and look what happened. At exactly that place, the bread didn't open up, so don't correct the scoring. Before baking, I like to give each of my doughs a small bath with water. This just helps to create additional steam, and steam is essential for our breads to open up properly in the oven. We're trying to create a dough sauna. The more steam, the better. And I'm so excited to bake the doughs now and show you what's going to happen. This is my default home oven setup. I use a stone and another tray with some rocks at the bottom. This way I can bake 2 breads and I don't need to buy a Dutch oven. To me personally, this inverted tray here on top is a game changer too. It allows you to trap all that steam below it. This dough sauna makes you perfect bread in your home oven. I'm adding some boiling water to the bottom stones. And as you can see, my oven is steaming and steaming. Perfect for making bread. When baking too hot or with too little steam, that incision is going to directly close during baking. Your bread will not rise, it will stay flat. And the idea of the Dutch ovens is that as water evaporates, this water stays inside of the baking vessel, creating a steamy environment. After around 30 minutes of baking, I remove the source of steam and bake for another 20 minutes until I have reached the desired crust color that I like. And look at the results! The trick has done everything we have hoped for. It really allowed this bread to nicely open up during the baking process. The bread looks perfect. This ear is going to provide that additional amazing texture. Now, let's quickly have a look at the crumb structure to see if my fermentation game was on point, and then repeat this a few more times to see that this actually works. Look at this crumb. It's the perfect crumb structure, nice and fluffy. This paired with the crisp texture of the ear, well, that's just the perfect sourdough bread in my opinion. And it's so simple, it's just flour, water and salt. Nothing else, simple bread. And now the second bread, my failure here, my double scoring caused the bread to not open up as nicely as it could have. So lesson learned, I'm never going to do that again. Now let's repeat this one more time, this time with a pure bread flour based dough. And of course, to reach statistic significance, I would probably need to repeat this at least 100 times more. Based on how the dough feels when scoring it, I can tell you this is going to simplify everything for you. And even here, the resulting breads looked amazing. What about baguettes and rolls though, which are proofed at room temperature? These kinds of doughs are especially hard to score. When making baguettes, the scoring technique, in my opinion, is the most challenging about the whole process. So I made another dough batch. I baked the doughs for another 30 seconds. And oh boy, scoring the baguettes was so easy. Even scoring the rolls, it was incredibly easy, unless anything I've ever tried before. And even here, the resulting breads looked amazing. They opened up exactly the way I wanted them to. And I know this technique sounds a little bit weird, but please give it a shot yourself and let me know how it goes. I can't wait to show you all the amazing things we're going to bake on this channel using this trick. Thank you very much for watching. May the gluten be strong with you.